Check, 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 check.
Test.
Zoom's still not getting audio because it would have replayed that. See if that red actually. I'm not getting nothing there. Okay, reset this already. Reset this not magic. Which we're hearing it, so the speaker works. Oh, let me see if I can hear. No. I'm not hearing that maybe because it's. That'll come up there, yeah. And we, I mean, no, because people want your ear to hear that. Like I said, we don't need to hear what people in Zoom are saying. Oh, yeah, we can do that. Now that let's try that. And then once again, I'm going to we can. Which other microphone do you use this one? And have that one because no one's talking. Is anyone talking from here? Let's try that.
So we'll just have to keep this.
There she is. I should be able to see it here.
Once again, that's our check mark again, saying that it's not.
I told him I was.
Okay, so
I can just use the microphone array and we'll put that.
just use the microphone array.
Yes.
System, same as system. Oh, microphone appears the array. And
You did good on those, for both of you, the photographs from the Congress.
so we'll hit there.
That way it'll come out of here into this microphone.
Okay. So I should shut this
I didn't see
microphone
the
off.
360 thing.
Yep, that can go off now.
I didn't see that.
I guess we'll do the turn.
Well, no, because they can't. Can they hear it? Can you hear this if this is off?
You should
No,
send
that
those
won't
over.
be
You should
here.
send
That
those.
needs to stay on here. There, I can turn this microphone on.
Okay, so now this microphone's on right now.
Yes.
So this person is on. Should I see if they can hear us?
Phone number 310, ending in 395. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Great.
We're going to get started shortly.
Good.
I'll leave the meeting here. During the usually, do you want me to keep it on Zoom or go to the Granicus screen?
We don't do Granicus.
Granicus, just leave it on.
Yeah, we don't do Granicus.
So one thing about this is that is,
He's going to control the mic, but that microphone is giving them sound. So after that, I should put it over.
when I do the roll call, I can still talk. Yeah, either way. And then I'm gonna plug in a presentation thing. And then he had a question, the guy, Andrew with the blue shirt. And then they were wondering if televised meeting had started. I'm not really sure of that answer. No, that's.
It'll go like that.
Okay, I just need a little more room to write, so I don't want to pull anything out. Okay, perfect. Okay.
Left-handed.
Yeah. Thank you. Hello, Zoom, is this Jeff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, I just want to make sure you can hear me. We'll ask you to do public comment once that happens. We're about ready to get started, so thanks for your patience.
Okay. Let me know when.
Okay.
Chair, are you ready to begin? Chair. Marcus was ready to come up, but Chair, are you ready to begin?
I am ready. All right, I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 6:35 p.m. on Wednesday, September 13th, 2023. I'll start the meeting off with our land acknowledgement. The Public Facilities, Recreation, and Infrastructure Commission acknowledges that the land on which we gather, and that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood, is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrielino Tongva and the Gabrielino Kizh peoples. Next, we'll move on to item 1B, our roll call. Aaron, if you will, call the roll.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Jackson?
Here.
Commissioner Krishna?
Here.
Commissioner Mason? Here. Commissioner Payton?
Here.
Commissioner Rano?
Here.
Vice Chair Carlos? And Chair Solomon?
Here.
We have everyone present and a quorum. Thank you.
Great. Next, we will move on to our Pledge of Allegiance. Would Rebecca from the Arts Department be so kind as to lead the room in the Pledge of Allegiance? Please stand.
Please stand. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to item 3, the approval of tonight's agenda. And I want to point out for the first time in a long time tonight, we have items on the consent calendar on tonight's agenda. So when I ask each of you, or when Aaron asks you to approve the agenda, Keep in mind that you are approving the order and everything that's on the agenda, and you are also approving items listed under item 6, the consent calendar. So whenever you say yes to approve this agenda, you are also thereby approving the consent calendar.
And just for point of clarification, since this is new to the commission and the commissioners, if there's something on the consent calendar that you have questions on, then you could either say, I'll save those for my commissioner comments and ask the questions at that time, but that at that time we probably wouldn't be able to change anything in the staff report, or you could pull it from the consent calendar and move it to the end of the agenda at excluded consent. So that's kind of how, just like the council members, when they pull items from the consent calendar, it goes to the end of the agenda, and then we present that item at the end of the agenda. Otherwise, the consent items stay on the calendar, and they're just moved forward as normal business.
So I'll go ahead and open it up for discussion. Do any commissioners want to be recognized to discuss pulling anything from the consent calendar?
I have a couple of questions about the public facilities, the overview of public facilities document.
Is it something that you could get, you think you could get answered in your commissioner comments?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so then if you, it's totally up to you. We could move it, or if you feel that we could answer those questions easily in the comments, then.
We can move it to later.
So move it off the consent
Sorry,
calendar?
I'll address them during my commissioner
Okay,
comments.
there we go. Thank you. I know this is new to all of us.
Seeing no other discussion, Aaron, I believe we are, I will recognize a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Aaron, will you please call the roll?
Okay. Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Krishna,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes. Do I
Commission.
need to also mention that I have to recuse myself from one of them, or is that
Yes,
later?
at this time, if you need to recuse yourself on anything on the consent calendar, this would be the time to say, I'm recusing myself from voting on this item.
Oh, yes, so I approve, but I recuse myself from voting on the item B.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Payton,
Yes.
Commissioner Rania,
Yes.
Vice Chair Carlos,
Yes.
Chair Solomon.
Yes, but like my neighbor, Commissioner Mason, I live within 500 feet of Kings Road Park, so please note my recusal on item 6B.
Thank you. So I had Peyton moving, and can you remind me who the second was? I'm sorry, I missed that. Carlos? Okay. Thank you. We have that item approved.
Great. Next, we will move on to item number 4, approval of the minutes from our last meeting on August 9th, 2023. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to go through those minutes. Is there any discussion of any correction to be noted? Hearing none, we will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Aaron will call the roll.
All right, Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Krishna,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Payton,
Yes.
Commissioner Rania,
Yes.
Vice Chair Carlos,
Yes.
and Chair Solomon.
Yes.
And that is approved. Thank you.
Great. Moving on to item number 5 on tonight's agenda. This is our public comment section. We welcome anyone to come before the commission to make any public comment on anything under our purview that we can address. We will start off the night by recognizing speakers on Zoom first. I believe that we have one, and that is Jeff Bartha. Jeff, I'll recognize you. Whenever you start speaking, please know that you have 3 minutes to speak, and then after that, we will mute you. Jeff, can you hear me?
Yep, I'm here.
All right, Jeff, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Jeff Bartha, West Hollywood resident, 18 years. Pickleball addict, 7 months. Came in this morning to Plummer Park and noticed that the actually get some shade in between our games. So now they are chained at the middle of the court, right by the net, the tennis net, where you really can't even get through. So it's kind of a log jam with 30 people, and the only shade available are during the mornings on the east side of the court. So I was wondering if the commission thought about adding 2 extra benches. We can put 1 in each corner to have basically those courts are all used for pickleball most of the day, and or some kind of shade structure. Also on the roof, where I also play, there is no shade. The only shade is in the facility underneath, next to court 1, and there's no benches, no nothing, in between courts 2 and 3, or even in between court 3 and the pool. So I was wondering if the commission had any thought about adding more benches or any kind of shade structure. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Seeing no other speakers on Zoom, we will move to in the room. Would anyone in the room like to make a comment under the public comment section? No comments in the room. Aaron, I believe you have a comment that we received that you'd like to read into the record.
That is correct, Chair. Thank you. I received one written comment presented by Callie Rogers, and it states it's 2 items. So the WeHo rooftop is lacking in shade. Would it be possible to get umbrellas or some other solution up to the rooftop courts? Only one court, court 1, has access to shade, and the other 2 courts have to interrupt games in order to cool down. And comment number 2 would be, would it be possible for Tenacity to put a parking validator on the roof? Open play lasts for 2 hours, and usually people reserve court time for 2 hours. And so most people would like to take advantage of the parking validation. The problem is there isn't an easy way to access it without creating a traffic jam in the parking lot. A rooftop parking validator machine would be amazing and efficient. And that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Aaron. Seeing no other comments, that concludes tonight's public comments portion. We will move on from item 5 onto item 6, the consent calendar, which we have already approved, noting our recusals. Moving on to item 7, public hearings. No public hearings scheduled for tonight. So we will move on to the meat of tonight's evening, item 8, new business. First, we'll hear on item 8A, and we will hear a presentation from our Arts Division.
Hey, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Marcus Mitchell. I'm the Public Art Administrator with the city's Arts Division. Thank you for considering our item tonight. We do have a very brief presentation. It's about 3 slides with visual accompanying materials. Would you like to see that, or should I just go right into the item? Do you have a preference for?
Yeah, I think we'd like to see them.
Okay, great. Could we cue that up, please? Thank you. Okay, I'll start while that's loading. So the item we're presenting tonight are the 2 neon artworks by artist Scott Froschauer, Relax You're Okay and One Love, which are currently installed on the Santa Monica Boulevard traffic median. They were installed in 2020 as part of the city's Art on the Outside program, which is a temporary public art program.
Marcus, hold on one moment while
Sure.
we get these images to come up.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's blocking it right now for external media. I'm not sure what the deal is with that.
I have it on a flash drive too. I don't know if that makes any difference. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it does or not. It may.
No, I have it already on one.
Because I know in the past, I know one of the issues we've been having is that if there's anything embedded in that presentation that has any type of copy, oh, he got it to work. Any type of copyright, it will block it. But
Okay.
Mr. Wonderful here got it
Thank
to
you.
work.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Go.
Okay, yeah, so those are very striking, kind of iconic artworks in that traffic median there. They were installed in 2020 as part of our temporary art program. In October 2022, the Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission directed art staff to acquire the artworks for the city with the recommendation that the artwork at the top, One Love, remain at its current location on Santa Monica Boulevard, and that staff explore the possibility of relocating Relax You're Okay, which is shown on the bottom, to the entrance of King Roads Park. As part of our due diligence, we created an online survey that was posted on the internet, and also we posted public notice seeking feedback from community members about their thoughts about relocating a neon artwork in front of Kings Road Park. We distribute about 500 door-hanging flyers with QR codes that link to the website. We received, in total, 41 responses from community members on North Kings Road or adjacent to the park. It was about a split vote, 50-50, with slightly more members responding to this question: do you support the proposed permanent relocation of the artwork Relax You're Okay to the entrance of Kings Road Park? A little more than 50% responded yes, affirmatively expressing excitement for new public art at the park. And then slightly below half responded no. We wanted to note that the no responses provided more context for reasoning, and overall, whether the responses were yes or no, we were happy to see an enthusiasm with the community and appreciation of these artworks. The no responses that we'd like to highlight included the recognition that the artwork is kind of a riff on the historic Route 66, and in that sense is site-specific. Also, the current location on Santa Monica Boulevard provides high visibility for the public to experience the artwork, and also considering the message of Relax You're Okay and how that works in a traffic median, especially as everyone knows with the traffic situation on Santa Monica Boulevard, that being an appropriate message at that location. Others cited concerns that the artwork would disrupt the natural oasis of the park with its scale and with the neon at night. Staff took these comments and considerations back to the Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission, and on August 17th, 2023, the Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission approved the recommendation to keep Relax You're Okay and One Love at their current locations shown on Santa Monica Boulevard. And tonight we're coming to the commission to seek approval to keep the artworks on a more permanent basis at this location. Thank you. If there are any questions or comments, we'd be happy to respond.
Great. Thank you, Marcus. We'll open it up now to questions from commissioners to Marcus and the Arts Division as a whole. If you have comments, save those for later. Right now, this is just questions to ask.
I have no questions.
Yeah, all right, we'll go down the roll. Commissioner Jackson.
I don't have any questions.
Commissioner Payton.
No questions.
I agree not to move it, but I do have one question. Why was it planned on being moved, and are we missing out on new artwork because if it stays there?
It was suggested by a commissioner who's no longer serving on the Urban Arts Subcommittee that the two current locations were pre-approved as locations for temporary artwork, and he was concerned that by putting a permanent artwork at a temporary location that it may, we might lose a site, so to speak, to program more temporary artworks and have changing exhibitions at that location. I don't know if that makes sense, but part of staff's exploration was considering the possibility of the proposed location in front of Kings Road Park potentially being a site for temporary rotating exhibitions, or just doing more analysis about how that could work in relationship to the park. And we realized we would have to come back for that approval and also conduct our own research internally. But that was the the initial reasoning behind the suggestion.
Marcus, could I get a point of clarification real quick? Because we have two commissioners that live next to Kings Road Park, so you are not asking them this evening to consider anything remotely doing with, anything to do with Kings Road Park at all?
That's great, thank you for clarifying.
Because-
Yeah.
Because my commissioners are getting nervous because they're
Right.
thinking they should
Yeah,
be recusing themselves.
thank you for that, Helen. No,
Yeah.
we're not. We're seeking just the approval for the artworks currently cited on the traffic meeting at Santa Monica Boulevard to remain there in a permanent capacity. That's what we're seeking tonight. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it's clear to the rest of the commission as well as the viewing public that Kings Road Park is not any part of this conversation. It's, yeah, okay, that the commission is considering.
Thank both of you. She saw me sweating. So.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Carlos, do you have any questions? Okay, I have a few questions that I wanted to ask. No surprise. I will limit, as Helen mentioned, any discussion about Kings Road Park, but in your consideration of possibly moving it, were there any other locations that were discussed?
No, we were directed to specifically look into that one location for, and also for Relaxer OK specifically. So that's the only scenario we explored.
You mentioned in the survey results that many community members mentioned the possible nuisance of a neon light being on for 24 hours. In the artwork's current location, is it lit 24/7, all hours of the day?
Yes.
In the future for neon art, just any sort of light installations, do you all have the ability to light them up and take them down at different times of the day? Is that something that's ever used in our art that features light work?
I know it's possible. I don't know if our current collection features neon works with that ability, but it is possible to program.
Okay. Last question for me is kind of a point of maybe staff clarification. I'm looking over at Helen, but you mentioned that on August 17th, you brought this in front of the Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission, and they approved the recommendation to keep the artwork where it is. As I've understood it, oftentimes these commissions overlap slightly on their purview. There gets to be kind of a Venn diagram of gray areas sometimes, but as I've understood the way that our purview of our commission brushes up against Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission is that they approve the artwork, and we shouldn't comment on the subject matter of the art that is not within our purview, and that's not what we should discuss. But we approve or give comment on feedback on site location.
Correct. And it's interesting because this particular installation probably overlaps into 3 commissions, because it probably overlaps a tiny bit into transportation, as Marcus had mentioned about, would it be a distraction to drivers? So it's kind of one of those ones that overlaps quite a bit. Your purview would be site and anything that you could think that would be a problem of it being installed in the public right away at that location. I mean, it's been there for a while, so obviously, and we don't know that it hasn't had any issues that I'm aware of. So, but yeah, that would be your purview, is basically the installation and the location.
What? I don't mean to slap Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission on the wrist or anything, but I guess I just want to make the point of clarification that even though they have weighed in on site location, technically that's outside their purview.
Well, yes, I would say yes and no, and Rebecca would probably stand up and join me on this, is art sometimes is location. So, if you put that behind a building, is it art or is it just a lit up sign behind a building? But on where it's at in context, it's art. So I would say that it's as you said, it's difficult to determine. Your determination would be, is it installed properly? Is it safe? Is it safe in the sense of how it's installed, not safe in the sense of does it bother the drivers? So it's kind of a it's a difficult thing to I guess address. And Rebecca may want to jump in. I see her getting up and wanting to jump in.
Just really quickly, this particular piece is site-specific. which means that the artist was specifically inspired by Route 66, and to convert the signage of Route 66 into a calming message. And that's why the Arts Commission really felt that it was very important to keep it in its current location, because it aligns with the artist's intent, and that's always where the Arts Commission is going to come from.
I'll accept that. One last question for Marcus or for Rebecca. In its current location in the median, have you ever had any complaints about it, the light specifically being any sort of nuisance, whether it be to nearby businesses or residents, but more importantly, the drivers?
Not ever. In fact, quite the opposite. This is one of the most beloved pieces that we've ever installed in the city.
Great. Thank you for that.
Chair, we have a question.
Commissioner Arano?
Let me ask one question. Is there any consideration for new artwork or different artwork for the Kings Road?
I'm glad you brought that up, because what we received from the responses in the survey was that there was a great enthusiasm for new art at Kings Road Park. So it's definitely something that we will consider, take a look at, plan for. And like Marcus mentioned, of course, we'll come back to you all for approval of the site when we have something real to share with you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And we're tiptoeing a little bit into the not on the agenda, and we probably shouldn't discuss.
Let's see what Commissioner Payton has to say.
Rebecca, could you move into the mic a little bit when you speak, please?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
We're clarifying again on temporary versus permanent, right? Is there anything in between, or what does temporary even mean? And what's the timeline on that? Because what happens if we have another artist 6 months, 6 years, whatever that may be, that has something else inspired by Santa Monica? And what's the consideration then if it becomes fully permanent?
So temporary in our city can mean a range of time. This particular piece has been on exhibit for almost 3 years. And in response to, if another artist were to come along and be inspired by Santa Monica Boulevard, there are other locations still within the traffic median that can receive new neon pieces, so we can still program new works there. And the beauty of our city is that the entire city is our canvas. So we're constantly finding new locations and new spaces and new sites to program and enrich with art.
Thank you. I was just thinking of the swimmer and how it was relocated, right? Because wasn't that previously
She was
on Santa Monica?
relocated a couple of times,
Right.
and then finally found her home at the Arc. And then in terms of permanent, the difference is that it becomes a city asset. And then we take care of it indefinitely. It becomes part of our collection. We maintain it, and we talk about it within the context of our urban art collection.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, this piece of art, these two pieces of art are owned by the city. They're not on loan or on display.
Incorrect. They are currently on loan. The Arts Commission has directed us to acquire them into our permanent collection. And now we're seeking approval of the permanent location for the permanent artworks.
Can you disclose what the price tag is on that acquisition?
Sure. The works were originally commissioned for, I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm going to say, you know? Okay. One of them was around 50 to 60,000. The other was in like a 30 to 40,000. I do have the exact numbers. They're very public. They're in the Arts Commission documents. I just don't have them at this time.
As far as commissioning to make them, that payment is to make them, to provide them to us for a loan for a set period of time. And now we are wanting to acquire these permanently. How does that process work? Are you in negotiations on a price point?
We had actually established from the beginning, staff had anticipated that this was going to be a very popular project, and based on the Commission's response, we had built in a first right of refusal into the artist agreement, which means that the artist is offering them to the city at the price that they would have sold 3 years ago. And so we're kind of getting a bargain. And then any of the funding that we have contributed to this point for the fabrication and the loan payments are being utilized as a down payment towards the acquisition. So there's just a small portion left to pay. Yeah.
What is the acquisition price?
The total of the two pieces. Again, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but it's in Arts Commission records.
Chair, since it doesn't affect our vote and we have a long night, I'm so sorry. But this isn't under our purview either, is the money, the aspect that's not under our jurisdiction or what we're being asked to do.
Yeah, I think it's important for the public to know that figure, but
Yeah, but they can go to an Arts and Commission meeting and learn it there. I feel like we're making you teach us about the Arts and Commission meeting right now, and I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm looking at our agenda and we have a lot to do tonight. Sorry.
if there aren't any other questions, we'll now move to discussion and then a final vote.
I love the pieces. I'll start if we're not going to do a roll call. I love the pieces. I think they're amazing, and I'm happy to see them on our streets. I have nothing else to say.
I absolutely love them. I drive by them every day and never been distracted, so they're great.
Yes, I would love to see them continue to stay there.
Agreed.
So we would need a motion.
I'll motion. Oh, just kidding.
So, thank you, Marcus and Rebecca. I just want to say, I do love these pieces, and I think the Boulevard is a perfect venue. Their current home is should be their permanent home. They're wonderful, and I agree with the Arts Commission and the Art Department that they should be permanent there. But I also agree with the chair that this is really kind of a dual commission item, and that these things should come to us in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll run it off and say I absolutely adore and love these pieces, and I think they are best suited right where they are. So I agree with the recommendation to keep them where they are, and thank you for bringing them to us. I will make a motion to approve this item 8A, as recommended to us by staff. Is there a second?
I second.
Commissioner Ragno, seconds. Aaron will now call the roll.
Thank you. Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Krishna,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Payton,
Yes.
Commissioner Ragno,
Yes.
Vice Chair Carlos,
Yes.
and Chair Solomon.
Yes.
All right, that item is approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Commission.
Thank you.
Thank you to Rebecca and Marcus from the Arts Division for bringing that forward. Next, we'll move on to item 8B, the WeHo Target Vision Zero Action Plan Update. And we will now hear from the Long Range Planning Division.
We have David Fenn with us here this evening, and he's going to do the presentation. We're just going to switch out real quick. He's going to do it from this station here. So. All right, David, it's your show.
All right.
David, you're going to need to use this microphone.
All right. Good evening, commissioners. My name is David Fenn. That just went off. No? My name is David Fenn, Senior Planner in the Long Range Planning Division here, with an update on Vision Zero. I have a presentation here I can go through. It's the same one that's in your packet, but I can provide some more context if you'd like. Otherwise, we can go right into questions. Would the commission like a presentation on this?
Yes, please.
All right. So we can go through the purpose and need and some of the recommendations. That's really the meat of this, and talk about next steps. So Vision Zero is really an effort to bring the city into alignment with a regional and international movement to work towards the elimination of traffic deaths. It's something that the City Council set us on the course towards about a year ago. And we've been working with a number of stakeholders over the last year to socialize a plan towards that. So we've gotten input so far from both County Fire and the Sheriff Department, as well as a number of boards and commissions, and a task force made up of members from each of those. We have consultant support on this from DKS and Urban Logic, and we used the Social Pinpoint platform for online engagement. So this is some of the preliminary data analysis that we did, looking at traffic collisions citywide. Over the 5-year period that we analyzed from 2017 to 2021, there were over 3,000 collisions in West Hollywood. Of those, 4 of them were fatal and 78 resulted in severe injuries. And you can see on the map on the left there where they're kind of clustered. Larger circles mean more collisions. So, perhaps unexpectedly, a lot of these collisions are happening on our kind of more commercial streets, largely at intersections, in places that I think if you move around the city, they'll be familiar to you. So diving into the data a little bit more, over 74% of the fatal and serious injury crashes involve vulnerable road users. So pedestrians, bicyclists, motorcyclists, people that aren't protected by the safety features of a car like airbags and seatbelts. Of those, over 40% were pedestrians, which I think makes a lot of sense in a city like West Hollywood where there's so much more pedestrian traffic than some of our neighbors. But it's still a number that we'd obviously like to bring down. Some of the risky behaviors that people point to a lot were also factors here. They were a lot smaller than the vulnerable user crashes, far fewer, at least in terms of crashes where they were the primary cause. But the way that this data is reported in police reports, if it's not the primary cause, it is not indicated that way. If it's like a secondary or tertiary cause of the incident, then it wouldn't be categorized that way. So our expectation is that it's an undercount based on the way the data is collected. Another finding was that the vast majority of these collisions in West Hollywood occurred at intersections rather than mid-block, which is where the conflicts occur between traffic going different directions. So looking at all of that data, before we get into kind of location-specific recommendations, we have a suite of kind of citywide recommendations that we are proposing, and we're here to get input from all of you on tonight, as we have with other boards and commissions. So one of these is that looking at, on that map, the darker streets are streets where we currently have higher speed limits, and if you compare that to the concentrations of crashes, the severe and fatal crashes that you're seeing there, bigger circles mean more crash, darker lines mean higher speed limits. A lot of these more severe crashes are happening on areas where our speed limits are higher. And there is new state legislation that allows the city and all cities in California to have more flexibility in how we set those speed limits, and we can make modest changes to it to provide more context-appropriate speed limits. So one thing that we're currently recommending further exploration of is potentially lowering speed limits citywide. So for example, speed limits that are currently 35 could go down to 30, speed limits that are 25 on neighborhood streets go down to 20, and it may sound insignificant, but those minor changes, when you look at the survivability of a crash with a motor vehicle, make a big difference. If someone hits you at 35 miles per hour compared to 30 miles per hour, there's a significant statistical difference in terms of your likelihood of surviving the crash or the degree of your severe injury. Obviously, people don't necessarily follow speed limits, so we're coupling these recommendations with recommendations for expanded traffic calming citywide. When places where it makes sense, those can take the form of things that we already have in various places in the city, bulb outs, traffic circles. Where we have unsignalized crosswalks, they can be raised up to sidewalk level as raised crosswalks, which essentially function as de facto speed bumps, forcing people to slow down for those crosswalks, as well as continuing to expand the city's bikeway network, which can separate vulnerable bicycles traffic from other traffic. And we have a number of projects already underway to do just that. Other systemic approaches that we're looking at is, continuing to upgrade our crosswalks in roadway warning lights where they're unsignalized, so that those flashers that alert motorists of crossing pedestrians. The engineering division has already had a lot of success installing those citywide, but there's a few more that still need the upgrades. Also just things as simple as refreshing, signing, and striping, and adding retro-reflective borders to traffic signals, which essentially draw your eye to traffic signals sooner when you're on a bend or in the early morning. If it's foggy or inclement weather, you can see those more quickly. They may seem very insignificant, but there's a lot of research that's being conducted that it does have a statistically significant impact on crashes by drawing people's attention to those signals sooner. Another thing that we're looking at exploring at certain locations where it makes sense is all-direction crosswalks, which reduce the amount of time that pedestrians spend in the intersection, because if they're, instead of crossing 2 legs, they're crossing 1. They do have a traffic impact because obviously if pedestrians are crossing in all directions, that means cars aren't proceeding in any directions. So we want to be careful about where we're recommending those, but there are a few places in the city where, especially as we see additional development and potentially future rail stations, the potential for a lot more pedestrian traffic where that might make sense. For example, Santa Monica La Brea or Santa Monica Fairfax. Santa Monica La Brea, for example, as those industrial uses give way to larger buildings that will draw more people, those kind of pedestrian volumes may warrant pedestrian scrambles, but we're going to be doing more analysis on the feasibility and impacts of that, but it is something that we're including in the plan as something for further consideration in the future. As well as leading pedestrian intervals, which we already have in some places. That's when, if a light is changing, pedestrians get a head start crossing the street before it goes green for motorists. And that just essentially makes them more visible because they enter the street before the motorist turns, which gives the motorist a little bit more time to react. And sometimes people are waiting behind a pole or something before the light changes, and it avoids that kind of miscalculation. Those also have an impact on traffic because if you're giving pedestrians a head start, you're holding vehicles for a little bit longer, but that's a much smaller impact than, say, an all-directional crosswalk. So we're recommending rolling out those in more key locations. So this is now where we're recommending kind of location-specific recommendations, and this is really drawn from where the most severe crashes were happening in the city. The green items are streets or locations where we already have major safety projects in the works. So there were, as I'm sure you're aware, many crashes on Fountain, as well as Melrose and La Cienega. But because those locations already have major infrastructure, Melrose is currently dug up for major construction work, our recommendation is to focus this first pass of priority location improvements on other parts of the city and then come back and reevaluate those streets after the current improvements are implemented to see if they're working and if there are additional things that are needed. So excluding Melrose Fountain and the La Cienega Rosewood intersection where LADOT is installing some signal upgrades, the remaining locations are the purple intersections and corridors on the map, Santa Monica Sunset, and a number of locations on both of those streets. They're ranked on the right there in terms of the severity of crashes, the frequency and severity of crashes, with Santa Monica La Brea being the number one. We did get a lot of public feedback through an online tool on this project. We also had in-person pop-ups at other city events where we directed people to the online tool, and this is just kind of a way to visualize some of the feedback we got. We had an online map where we had people place pins where they had different types of safety concerns. So for example, looking at Sunset Boulevard, there's a lot of comments kind of towards mid-city, the western part of the city closer to the bars and that sort of activity center there. All types of concerns, but a large amount of them were pedestrian concerns as well as general safety concerns. There were fewer vehicle safety concerns and fewer of them on the east side in general. Fountain, concerns all over the place of all types. Peaking in places that I think make sense in terms of the major intersections there. But obviously Fountain, we have a major safety project in the works with the Protected Bike Lane project. Santa Monica, similar kind of peaks at areas you might expect, like Fairfax or San Vicente. Kind of more balanced in terms of the distribution of different types of concerns, which I think makes sense given the nature of the corridor. It's more diverse in terms of its uses with a lot of residential as well as the commercial with the mixed-use areas, and then the bars to the west side. And then Melrose, sort of all over the place. But again, something that we want to circle back to after the current safety improvements are complete. So this is an example of the kind of report card for the specific locations that we're going to be including in the final plan. This is Santa Monica, excuse me, Santa Monica La Brea, where there were 43 total crashes in that 5-year period. So it was our #1 location in the city in terms of an area we'd like to address. 4 of those were fatal or serious crashes. They were both pedestrian and motorcycle crashes as well as bicyclist crashes. And this is one of the locations where we are recommending at least the exploration of some of those more potentially impactful items, such as an all-directional scramble crosswalk. Again, that's not something we're recommending everywhere because it will have an impact in terms of traffic circulation, and it's something that we are recommending further analysis with our consultant and engineering team to determine what those impacts are and present them to everyone before anything's actually implemented. But for the purpose of this plan, it is something that we're recommending be looked at further going forward, given the severity of the crashes at this location, as well as kind of the more moderate interventions such as the retroreflective backplate and the leading pedestrian interval. And obviously, if speed limits were reduced citywide, that would reduce the potential severity of crashes at this location as well. So I'm not going to go through all of the other locations in detail, but it's kind of similar based on the different locations. They were in your attachment B to your staff report. We can go into any of them if you'd like in the questions. But we'll also be circulating the full draft plan once it's available. We're just kind of waiting for internal comments from different folks within the city before we circulate that, but we'll work with your staff liaisons to get that out to you. One additional thing that is in development is in terms of the prioritization of the improvements that come out of this plan. A kind of best practice regionally and nationally is to bring an equity layer into this in terms of where we implement things first, on top of just where crashes happen, but where is there potentially more need for more vulnerable users. And that is also something that ties into the availability of state or federal funding to make these improvements. If you can make a determination in terms of equity need, there is more funding available to address them. So what we're proposing is potentially using an outside agency's existing index. This is Metro's that they use to prioritize their projects. Our recommendation is potentially listing which of these categories that Metro has based on the percentage of people of color and lower income communities, households within census tracts, and we would apply that to the different locations, and then that could help us in terms of grant applications to get funding to fund some of the projects on the east side, which light up as higher need and those sort of analyses. That's not to say that we wouldn't be doing the improvements on the west side, it would be a different pot of funding likely for those. This is where we are in terms of schedule. We've been at this a while. We had a number of workshops with our task force, which is made up of representatives from different commissions. We're currently in the process of broader outreach, which, making our rounds with various commissions. We were just at the Senior Advisory Board, the Disabilities Advisory Board, the Transportation Commission, but we're looking at rolling out an additional digital outreach tool as well as some more pop-ups at other community events over the next couple weeks. We're just waiting for the launch of the Long Range Planning Division is launching piloting the city's new digital engagement platform, which is something we're rolling out for all projects, and Vision Zero is one of the projects that we're going to be launching that with, basically as a way to get additional input online. And then we hope to go to council for final approval in the fall. But that is pretty much it for my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions you might have, and we're definitely anxious for any feedback you have in terms of, locations we might have missed or other strategies you think are worth considering, or, other things we're considering that you think we shouldn't be considering. That sort of feedback would be really helpful. Thanks.
Thank you so much, David. With that, we'll go around the horn for questions. We'll start off this way first. Commissioner Payton.
Thank you for this. It's been informative. On the timeline, I saw you're ideally bringing it to council this fall, and then what happens after that?
So what we'd be taking to council is an action plan, which is something that's required to access certain state funds related to public safety. on our roadways. If, assuming it's adopted by council, our expectation is that we would start doing some feasibility analysis on some of the specific recommendations with our folks over in Public Works for the implementation of those, and start implementing projects. Some of them may require less analysis, some of them may require more, but they would individually go through a process with our engineering team as well as the commissions that are relevant for them before implementation. And then we're planning to recommend an annual kind of progress report back to the council and the relevant commissions. This is where we are. This is what the crash data over the past year has been. This is what we've implemented of what we said we were going to look at. This is what we haven't implemented and why. And then there's also some other things that we're exploring, looking at. Like there's a national, I think it's international actually, day of traffic remembrance in November every year. So we're looking at recommending that the city honor that annually as kind of a milestone to look in on where we are in Vision Zero. Is it working? Is it not working? Can we adjust? So
thanks for that additional information. And maybe this is really belaboring this, but when would the actual first impact of this be seen? Like when would the first changes happen?
So for some that fit into existing work plans, like things like adding additional traffic calming or lowering speed limits, that could happen within a couple months. Others that require more intensive analysis, like the scrambles, probably longer, more like a year. But it's really determined by we are the planning team, the availability of Public Works resources to actually implement it and slot into the city's work plan. But we're optimistic that some of these could happen fairly quickly, and some of them would also be enforcement programs with the sheriff that could happen much quicker than say an infrastructure improvement. So I get not a super clear answer, but it varies.
No, I appreciate that. It's helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Aranya.
Thanks for your time and your proposal. It's very informative. I actually don't have any specific questions at this time.
Sam, thank you so much for all the work. My questions were on timing and they've already been answered.
Commissioner Mason.
Yeah, I think my question was kind of what kind of input you're looking for, and I personally just really support all the little things we can do now. There's never too much. So like the signing and striping, the refresh signing and striping around the light posts, anything to get those crosswalks that aren't on major intersections more attention. Huntley and Santa Monica Boulevard is a good one. I saw someone get mowed down there. It was pretty traumatic. So, it's just anything to draw, and I've almost been hit there a million times too. So it's personal, but anything to draw more attention that we can to make things safer. So I just want to hear, I like hearing, and I think I'm hearing that the city's going to do a whole bunch of stuff, not just like one thing. Is that kind of correct in that? Yeah? Sorry. Are we doing a whole bunch of stuff and not just kind of like looking for one thing to do, or it's like we're going to
exactly.
throw everything at it?
The locations are areas where we're focusing some resources in terms of addressing like hotspots in the data, but really the bulk of this, I think, is more the kind of what are the systemic things we can do citywide, like the speed limits, like the posting more speed limit signs, expanding traffic calming. That's a lot of little things all over the city, rather than a few kind of focused, more reactive things. And the idea with that is that we can be more proactive rather than reactive, because there's an element of randomness with collisions that we're never going to be able to eliminate, but we can kind of prevent them as much as possible with effort across the city.
I think I like seeing and hearing that we're going to do, not just pick one, we're going to do a whole bunch of stuff and whatever we can do, and be proactive about it, because it is definitely an issue. I think timing was the thing, and I think that's it for me, actually. Thank you for your presentation.
Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very good. I don't really I think it's a great idea for slower streets. It's safer for the community, especially for pedestrians, and hopefully seeing kids play around in the street. But my one question is, are we looking at what our neighboring cities are doing? Because my fear is that we're going to be like a speed trap where people come into our city and the speed limit has drastically changed?
Yeah, and actually, we're a little bit behind our neighbor cities in terms of Vision Zero overall. Many of our neighbors, Culver City, Los Angeles, Santa Monica, have had Vision Zero efforts underway for several years, and we're starting to see some of the fruit of that. I don't know if anyone's been over to Santa Monica lately. There's a whole mess of protected bike lanes and traffic calming and things that they've been able to roll out pretty quickly over there. We've actually, one of our directives from council was to take meet with LADOT and get kind of their best practices and lessons learned from their approach, and we've had those conversations with them on what they're doing. They have started rolling out kind of common sense, minor speed limit reductions. They're looking at them in kind of a much more, they're not doing as wholesale of an approach. It's more targeted to kind of specific streets. We may end up with a more targeting approach, but our thinking has been that we can look at where state law allows us to reduce them and have a conversation in terms of the feasibility of that. And the expectation is we may recommend citywide, and it may end up being much smaller than that, but we're starting with the wider net, and then we'll whittle it down based on what makes sense. So we may end up in a very similar place, but we're starting a little bit more ambitious in terms of that. But they just took an item to council, an update on their Vision Zero plan, and it recommends additional speed limit reductions, building on what they've already done.
And have you taken into consideration, because I know I do it, I commute to Culver City every day, so I know about the safe streets and what a traffic nightmare it is for a lot of people who are not used to it. Have you considered when we go slower and when we put in more precautions that people are going to start using more side streets and being more dangerous on the side streets?
Certainly, yeah. I think that's part of why not doing any one of these tactics is so important. If we lower the speed limits on main streets, I mean, first of all, I should preface it with at rush hour, no one's able to go the speed limit on our main streets. This is kind of more of an issue for off-peak and later times. But in situations where they can, people may choose to divert more onto side streets, and that's why the simultaneous recommendation to explore more traffic calming on side streets is important as well. As well as many of our side streets, we have got comments from Transportation Commission that many of our side streets they don't think have enough speed limit signs indicating what the speed limit is on side streets. So just one of our other recommendations is just installing more signage so people know what it is, and that isn't an excuse.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Vice Chair Carlos.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, David, for the presentation. You and your team done a great job putting this together. I have a question about the San Vicente corridor between Beverly and Melrose. I'm surprised there hasn't been more data and more public comment to flag that area. It's a 4-lane road. There's no stop signs or lights between Beverly and Melrose, and cars travel very fast there. I think, and I've seen accidents at Rosewood and San Vicente. I've seen one car that went into a backyard on San Vicente. So I think that area would benefit from some speed remedies if possible.
Thanks. We can definitely look at that in future rounds of this.
That's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Jackson actually stole the one question I was going to ask about neighboring cities. So I'll just roll forward into comments based off of that. I also commute to Culver City every day, so share some of the same thoughts or concerns. I grew up in a tiny little speed trap town, is what it was known as, and I guess my one comment would just be to encourage, especially when it comes to the speed reduction, to encourage as much collaboration, especially on Santa Monica Boulevard and Sunset, with our neighboring towns. I don't know how effective it is if for only 1 mile only, the speed limit drops 10 miles per hour and then it picks right back up as soon as you hit Beverly Hills city limits. And also the negative connotation that WeHo might have as being the speed trap town. But thank you so much for bringing this forward, and I look forward to seeing each of these as they get implemented. I could go around the. I've given my comments, so I can go around the horn. Tell you what, I'll open it up. If anyone wants to give a comment, go ahead and jump in. No other comments?
I love the ideas of the scrambles. Let's put a couple of those in. Those are great.
So I believe this item on our agenda is just receive and provide feedback. I don't believe it needs a vote.
It does not need a vote. It just needs a consensus. I mean, it's just you're basically providing comments, and he's going to take back the comments. There's no action on the commission's behalf this evening, so it does not require a roll call vote now.
All right. Well, David, thank you so much for bringing this to us. We look forward to staying updated. And with that, we will move on to item 8C, the rail integration study, first last mile planning update. We will hear a presentation. Is this also from David?
It's also me. Yeah.
He's doing a double header.
All right.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Please state your name.
Yeah. It's different than it does on my computer.
Where's full? This is the new. Where's full screen on PDF? We're working through some technology. Oh, I think I just found it. It's right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. Well, good evening again, commissioners. It's kind of unusual to do 2 items in a row like this. David Fenn, Senior Planner in the Long Range Planning Division. I have a presentation on the rail integration study and some of our early analysis on first last mile planning. Again, it's the same presentation that was in your packets. If you want to skip to comments or feedback, we can do that, or I can kind of go through it again and describe what we've done here.
Yeah, I think if you could give us a brief presentation here, we'd appreciate it.
All right. So this is all based on the rail project that the city's been working for a couple of years to bring to town, the northern extension of the Metro K line. We've been to various commissions talking about this over the years. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. It's a 9-mile extension of the Metro K line with up to 4 stations in the city, depending on which alternative is selected, or 1 if it goes straight up La Brea. It's funded by Measure M, in part, and it's originally scheduled for the 2040s, but the city is working with Metro on how to accelerate that timeline. So that's why we're here tonight talking about first last mile planning a little bit earlier than you normally would with that schedule. You can kind of skip through the benefits of the rail project. That's not really the focus here. So first and last mile planning. What we're doing is looking at what does it take to get people to and from the Metro rail line, whether that's the first mile from their home to a station or the last mile from their station to their office or vice versa. And many people make those trips biking or walking or on local transit kind of feeder service, but it's really important to the success of the final project, and it's something that is much more in the city's purview than it is in Metro's, and us taking an early look at it can actually position some of the projects that we identify for state and federal funding that requires that those projects be included in the first last mile plan. So these are the 3 primary stations in the city that we analyze first last mile projects for. There's a 4th station at La Cienega Beverly, which is just outside of the city, but majority of that would be in the city of Los Angeles, so we didn't include it in our first last mile analysis, just because there's just a tiny sliver of the city within the kind of walkable radius to that station. But it is something that we would look for collaboration with Los Angeles on in planning around that area, but they really need to take the lead on it because we can't dictate to them what to do in their streets. So the purpose here is really to identify what are the primary and secondary pathways that will get people to and from those stations. We did a series of walk audits with staff and the consultant team, identifying opportunities for improvements along those corridors that people, I guess my mic is dying, apologies. All right, is that better? And the goal is really to identify, what are the strengths of those corridors, what are the shortcomings, are there things we can do to improve them as a walking or biking experience to and from those future stations, and can we identify them now so we can line them up in the capital improvement program and update the city's bike plan and everything to get them in line for outside funding, so less of this is done at the city's expense. So back in November and December, we did a series of walk audits, really documenting the conditions, the pros and cons. We took a lot of notes, took a lot of photos, and this presentation is really the results of that and our kind of first impressions of things that we might do to address some of those conditions. And we're here tonight to get input from all of you on if there are other things that we should be looking at, if it's the right sort of things that we're noticing, do you agree, do you disagree? Are there other corridors we should be looking at rather than the ones that we focus on? So the kind of safety improvements we're looking at are based on the kind of toolkit of first and last mile improvements that Metro looks at when they do this analysis, because our hope is that the city's final plan can feed right into Metro's plan, which can help us get it implemented through their project. Some of them are similar things to what we talked about with Vision Zero in terms of curb extensions and traffic calming. Other things like pedestrian lighting or ADA upgrades to curb ramps are less of a traffic safety thing and more of just kind of a user experience and accessibility thing. There's also a series of comfort and health improvements that we looked at as part of this. Are there places where additional landscaping and shade are needed to make a walk comfortable, or places where someone might need some assistance in terms of wayfinding? They might not know what the destinations are nearby, or we don't have enough benches on the street for people that need to take a break on the walk up to Sunset, for example. So this is the first station area, La Brea, Santa Monica. It's one where we only have 25% of the station area. The rest is in Los Angeles, but we do have a major part of it in terms of La Brea itself and Santa Monica, which we expect will be the main way that people will access that station. In our walk audits, both of those main corridors had a pretty good walk environment, but in the opinion of the auditors. Fountain, as I'm sure many of you know, is not a great place to walk. There's a lot of obstructions up there. Some of the key findings here, Santa Monica is generally a pretty well-designed main street already. There's several kind of more minor opportunities for improvements to improve accessibility. Things like some of the intersections are missing high visibility tactile domes for people who rely on those to, people with trouble seeing rely on those to know when they're in an intersection. It's just kind of a basic accessibility thing. On La Brea, there's some auditors pointed to maybe not enough pedestrian lighting or not ideal pedestrian lighting. Willoughby was generally seen as a comfortable side street that we expect some people will use to get to La Brea on their way to the station. And then Fountain is very challenging, but kind of similar to Vision Zero. We're flagging it as a street where the conditions are going to change significantly before the rail project is implemented. So these are some of the areas where the auditors recommended different types of improvements. There's kind of a variety all over the place, but generally, a lot less is needed on Santa Monica. There is the whole kind of bucket recommended up on Fountain. Traffic calming, certainly, and wayfinding. A lot of the things recommended for Willoughby are also things that are being studied as part of the separate Willoughby Greenway project, so some of these may get implemented kind of regardless of this plan. But we'll go on to Fairfax, Santa Monica here. Go ahead.
Can I ask a quick point of clarification? Are these aren't the decided upon locations for the K-line stops? We're still in that process, right?
Correct. So I should clarify, there's 3 alternatives being studied by Metro, and at the end of the presentation, I'll note to you all that there are Metro community meetings next week where you can all weigh in on Metro's process. But there is a possibility that if Metro chooses the La Brea alternative, that only La Brea, Santa Monica would be a station. If they choose the Fairfax alternative, then we would have both Fairfax, Santa Monica, and La Brea, Santa Monica. If they choose the westernmost alternative, then it would be all 3 of these. The way we've been looking at this, though, is that the kind of improvements we're identifying as part of this plan are fairly, they're low impact. They're generally things that make the city a better place to walk around in. So, identifying a bunch of potential pedestrian improvements at a location that may not end up getting a station, either we could not implement those, or the council may elect to implement some of them anyways, because it just makes it a better place to walk around.
Thanks.
So back to Fairfax, Santa Monica. This one is much more West Hollywood. It's really our show more than it is Los Angeles. In this area too, the general consensus was that Santa Monica Boulevard is already pretty pleasant in terms of a place to walk. Fountain, still not a great place to walk here. Willoughby kind of in the between. This is also the area where Willoughby is split between West Hollywood and Los Angeles, so it's kind of a jurisdictional challenge as we're discovering with the Willoughby project. One of the things in terms of Metro's first last mile analysis is they look at primary corridors, the corridors that lead directly to the station, and also secondary corridors, which the identification of which side street is the secondary route in terms of if you're on other side streets, how do you filter your way to Santa Monica or Fairfax to get there? Our team took a best guess that Crescent Heights would be one, which seems pretty clear as one of the major streets there, but the identification of Genesee or Spalding versus one of the other ones, is obviously a little bit up for debate. I think those ones were chosen based on their, where there were crosswalks at Santa Monica and where there was, adequate shade and that sort of thing. But if there's another one that you think warrants additional attention, we could look into it. Metro just does require that, we can't identify everything as a secondary corridor. There may be, 2 or 3 per station area. So in terms of the findings, this area had kind of more significant findings. There's a mid-block crosswalk on Crescent Heights that doesn't have any curb ramps at all, which is an ADA violation, so that's the sort of thing the city's gonna have to address kind of regardless of this process. It's legally required to if we make any upgrades over there. On Fairfax, especially in the portion in Los Angeles just outside of West Hollywood, the sidewalks are fairly wide, but there are a lot of obstructions on the street in terms of, utility boxes and bus shelters that are kind of placed very close together, and that's something, we'll communicate those findings to them. Pedestrian lighting needs were also highlighted on Fairfax in both cities. Additional findings, those side streets were identified were generally seen as comfortable places to walk. Both Fountain and Crescent Heights were seen as needing more improvement. As you can see, there's a lot more that the team recommended in different places here, kind of really spanning the whole gamut. With perhaps a focus on the crosswalk upgrades, a lot of traffic calming down on Willoughby, and a need for really all of it up on Fountain, but that's been pretty well documented. At San Vicente, this station is kind of interesting because it's the only station within a reasonable walk of Beverly Hills, so it kind of brings in additional jurisdictional challenge, but it's a very small percentage. There's also kind of a unique challenge in terms of the way the street grid is here. The Pacific Design Center and West Hollywood Park kind of break up the grid, more the PDC and the Metro Yard than the park. People will have to walk kind of all the way around it to get to the places on various sides of it. And then there's also the significant challenge in terms of the grade up to Sunset, and getting people up the hill is a significant challenge. So for that reason, some of these, San Vicente was highlighted here, especially the area north of Santa Monica, because it's very exposed. There's not a lot of shade on that street. If you're walking uphill, it's very challenging. Palm is perhaps a little bit more pleasant of a walk, but it's still challenging. So Holloway was identified here as a potential alternative, but obviously at that point you're getting pretty far away from where the station is proposed in the center of the map there. And Sunset is similar, where there's not as much shade, not as much of a comfortable walk, and just the challenge of getting there is really significant. So I think I kind of touched on most of this. Yeah, so these are where potential improvements were highlighted. Really I guess the main differences are shade was highlighted for San Vicente and Fountain, and Sunset more so than the others. Santa Monica itself, relatively few improvements needed. Again, we have some of those missing ADA high visibility domes. Down on Melrose, there's some improvements needed, but that was a hard one for the team to judge because a section of it is under construction and another section of it is about to be. So I can go relatively quickly through the bike network, but the main takeaway was that there's not a lot of bikeways existing. As we know, there's a lot that's been previously planned. When those two are combined with ones that were previously planned and ones that are being studied right now, such as Beverly and Fountain, it really fills in the network in the city, so there's not a lot of additional bikeways needed. The team did identify, though, that to kind of get people between those main corridors, there may be some improvements needed to small side streets to kind of connect the network up and fill in those gaps. And some of those are on Metro's regional priority network, which may help the city get funding for any improvements on those corridors. So I know that was a lot of information, but I mean, the kind of feedback we're looking for here, are there strengths or barriers that you're aware of that you didn't hear me mention that you think we should look into? Are there other projects that we should consider? Are there things we're considering that you don't think are a priority, that sort of thing? And I also wanted to mention that Metro's community meetings in terms of the advancement of the actual rail project and which alternative is chosen, where they are in the environmental impact report, they're updating the community starting next week. There's a virtual meeting on Zoom. There's also a meeting right here at the West Hollywood Aquatic Recreation Center on Tuesday the 26th. There's also one in LA in Baldwin Hills, but it's a little bit farther away. And all the details are at weho.org/metro. Thanks.
Finish the line. Now we'll open it up for comments. Commissioner Mason, you want to start us?
I don't think I have any questions or comments. It's a lot of work, and I'm sure it all depends on what Metro decides. It's a lot of information. Thank you for your presentation.
Commissioner Jackson?
I agree. It's a lot of information to absorb. As a person who would prefer to take public transportation than drive to work every day, it is something that we should consider. Well, they're going to build a rail anyway, most likely, but we're not talking about a physical rail. We're talking about like one of those buses that are on their own, or is it actually on a track?
So the rail project is a light rail system similar to the Expo line or the K line. In this area, Metro is only studying it as being fully underground, so it'd be bored tunnels similar to the Purple line, but with smaller trains in them, more like the Expo line.
I think you did a very good study, a walk study. What was the determination of a half-a-mile walk, like the wheel zone?
So that's kind of a industry standard in terms of what we expect people to be willing to walk to and from a station. It's typically a quarter mile or a half mile for people walking and up to 3 miles for people biking.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Payton?
Super thorough. Thanks for all the hard work.
Commissioner Ragno?
I agree. Thank you. Very informative. No comments or questions.
Thanks for the presentation. Just one quick question on the walk audits. Did you conduct any of them at night when it was darker? I saw that one of the options was more pedestrian lighting, but I was just curious.
So we didn't do full audits at night, but both some of the consultant team and myself, as we were accessing the city for other times, just happened to notice that certain areas were darker. But that is something we could look into for future exploration, is doing a more thorough look at night if there are other locations that we missed.
Thank you.
Commissioner Carlos?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, David. As far as a wheel network and taking a bicycle for the first mile or the first and the last mile, what part of the current Metro ridership now utilizes bicycles? Do you kind of have an idea?
I don't have a number off the top of my head, but I could reach out to our folks at Metro and perhaps get back to you.
Is it being utilized? Is it a large?
Yeah, I mean, I take the red line in from downtown and then the 4 bus over to the city every time that I'm in the office. And on most days there's 1 or 2 people with a bicyclist on the red line train with me, and often the same on the buses. Some of the stations have more kind of equipment at them that facilitates people to bike to and from. Like the stations downtown have bike share stations where people can leave a public bike at the station and then continue. The station in Hollywood has a bike hub, which is kind of a staffed little room where that locks, and you have a key card to it, and bicyclists can lock their personal bike to the station, lock their personal bike there in a secure location, and take the train and come back and not be worried that it's been stolen while they were gone. That's certainly something the city will be advocating for Metro to include in some of our stations in West Hollywood, but those are kind of decisions yet to be made.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Then, so that's great. That's one of my questions. So the northern extension, when it passes through West Hollywood, it's all three alternatives will be underground.
As Metro is currently studying them, all are being studied as fully underground.
Okay. And I didn't understand the last part I think the chair brought up as far as if they go with, let's say, the San Vicente, Santa Monica station, then all three stations will be built? Is that?
So there's three routes being considered. They're all trying to make the trip from the Expo line, the E-Line Expo down in kind of West Adams up to Hollywood, and then they either go up La Brea primarily, Fairfax primarily, or the kind of combination of Fairfax, Beverly, San Vicente, Santa Monica alternative that the city council prefers. That westernmost route would also, it would have all the same stops in West Hollywood. They basically build off of each other. So if you're coming up to San Vicente, Santa Monica, it then has to make its way back over to Hollywood Highland. So then it would proceed, east under Santa Monica with a station at Santa Monica Fairfax and a station at Santa Monica La Brea. But it wouldn't, for example, have a station at, say, Beverly and 3rd, which the La Brea alternative would have, if that makes sense. So it would have the additional stations in West Hollywood, but it wouldn't have the other stations of those routes farther south.
Thank you.
I just want to say I very much appreciate the cart before the horse sort of approach to this, in that, like you mentioned, regardless of where these metro stops end up, most of these improvements, all of these improvements are improvements that will enhance the pedestrian way of life, regardless of whether or not there's a metro stop there. I have a 9-month-old at home. So my walks through the city of West Hollywood have looked a lot different in the past year than they did before, and that I normally have a stroller with me. And I pay a lot more attention to the sidewalks than I used to. So a question for David is, as you all conducted your audits, did you take into account the urban forestry? Oftentimes our sidewalks are broken up because of the root system from trees that are growing, oftentimes non-native trees that are growing nearby and breaking up the sidewalk.
So I would say we're definitely aware of that phenomenon. It's definitely a challenge because we kind of have the dual, both shade from trees and good sidewalks are beneficial to pedestrians, and they are often in conflict, as you say. I know Helen probably knows more about this than I do, but the city does have a program looking at more diversity of trees and reintroducing kind of native species that should address some of those problems. Like a lot of the really bad sidewalks, and less so in West Hollywood, but certainly around Los Angeles, you have a lot of these old, enormous ficus trees that have got out of control, and that is not the kind of tree that we would introduce now if we were planting a tree.
But was that noted in your audit at all? This particular sidewalk here within our range is in poor shape because of the root system?
Where we called out sidewalk issues, that we weren't necessarily ascribing cause to them.
Okay. That's the only question I had. I'll open it up for comments now. Remember, we are just providing feedback on this item, so no vote. This will be your chance to give any feedback for them to take away. The only comment I'll make is that I feel like curb ramps are, regardless of where these stations end up, again, stroller, but I can't imagine sometimes how hard it might be to get around certain areas in town if you're in a wheelchair, because there is no way to get from the sidewalk down to the street, to cross the street, to get up to the next sidewalk. So I think that those would enhance everyone's quality of life, regardless of where these metro stops end up.
I have one quick question. Sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
I was just going to clarify that. I should note that most of the time when curb ramps were noted on those maps, it was places where the curb ramp existed. It just didn't have that kind of high visibility yellow treatment. There were a handful of places where the curb ramps were missing. I think a few on Fountain. There's that one crosswalk on Crescent Heights. Generally in West Hollywood, it's pretty good in terms of the existence of curb ramps, but where we noted them missing, we flagged them. I don't want to give the impression that all of those maps where curb ramps were highlighted was that they were missing, because that's not the case. Sorry, go ahead, Commissioner.
Oh, no, I didn't know you were going to answer. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Is there an estimated completion date for the Metro if it gets estimated? I know it's
$54,000 question.
It's not before the Olympics, right?
No. There was a point where we were shooting for that. It's unfortunately no longer feasible with the timeline of these kind of projects. Metro's original timeline was starting in 2041, maybe opening by 2047. The reason the city got involved is because that wasn't acceptable, and also the amount of money that they have set aside is not going to be enough regardless. So local jurisdictions are going to have to help, the state's going to have to help, others are going to have to help. It's really entirely dependent on pulling together the funding. We're much more optimistic than we have been in the past with Supervisor Horvath in the county office. If it all came together, everything, best case scenario in terms of finishing the environmental, finishing the project, engineering, finishing the funding package, it's probably more like 2029 or 2030 now rather than 2028.
I think the thought that popped in my head was during all that craziness that we're going to expect, would our streets and major intersections in WeHo be kind of torn up and under construction?
So the good news is because they're looking at underground rail, the impacts would be limited to the very specific station locations. It wouldn't be in between. The tunnel boring machines kind of proceed under the streets with almost no impact on the surface. But at the places where the actual station is being constructed, there's periods of very intense impact where the entire intersection is ripped up. They then put temporary decking down that allows traffic to continue over for several years while their construction proceeds underground. And then intense impacts again when those are ripped up and they restore the permanent street. But it would be similar to what you're seeing right now on Wilshire with the Purple Line construction, kind of near the County Art Museum and other places where intense impacts for a while and then sort of a strange temporary decking in between and then intense impacts again afterwards. But Metro's gotten a lot better at like a business interruption fund and other means to kind of help with some of those impacts, and the city is certainly looking at pushing them to do as much as possible in that area.
Cool. Yeah, I just realized the Olympics are coming, so thank you for that.
I had a quick question. Will any businesses or structures be impacted by the stations? In terms of being removed and...
Yes, definitely. At Santa Monica, San Vicente, there's a Metro property there, so we're encouraging them to use as much of their own property as possible for the station. The actual stations are generally built under the public right-of-way, but the entrances, the kind of portals with the escalators and elevators would be on adjacent properties. Santa Monica, San Vicente, between the sheriff's station and the Metro site, there's probably enough public land that at least the main entrance would not impact private facilities. At Santa Monica, Fairfax, they would have to purchase, one of the corners of that intersection for the station. Probably not the southwestern corner, because that's historic and that would be an additional impact under CEQA, but one of the other corners they would have to purchase. Same at La Brea. They would have to, probably not the brand new, relatively new apartment building, but they would likely purchase one of the other corners, the private properties there, and that would become the station.
If there are no other comments, we will see each and every one of you Tuesday at 12 p.m. online for the first of 3 meetings next Tuesday. Thank you. And another one here in this building on the 26th. David, thanks for both your presentations tonight. I hope we were helpful, but you were helpful to us, so thanks. That concludes our new business for the evening. We will move on down our agenda. Item number 9, unfinished business, there's none. Item 10, excluded consent. We kept it all on. Item 11, items from staff. Helen, do you have any updates?
I don't have any updates. I think Erin's been sending most of the different events that are going on. I don't know if Stephanie had anything she wanted to add this evening, or I can briefly go over the tennis court, the benches that were brought up during public comment. My understanding on the benches is that those courts are being used for both tennis and pickleball. So when the benches are moved, they're moved into the shade, but that's an area that on tennis courts you have, and this goes back to my days in recreation, on tennis courts you have a back court, as we call it, which is behind the player. So you can't have any obstructions behind the player or across or next to the player. There's a zone that they need to play in. So when we move benches, we're moving into those zones where the tennis players are playing. So, you know, the first thought is, well, why don't they just move them back? Well, the problem is when people start moving benches like that, they're relatively heavy because we don't want them moved around. They start dragging them, which starts to impact the court. I mean, we can look at different options for shade, but there's limited space on all the courts. That's just the way they were designed at the time because they were designed predominantly for tennis. So, you know, these are things that we'll have to continue to look at and see if there's modifications that we can make to get more shade on the courts. But the benches currently, while I'm not a fan of the chain, we will probably have to make sure that they stay in the same place because we don't want someone getting hurt that runs into a bench or runs into something that's been moved into the area of play. So those are the concerns that were brought to my attention today when I inquired about why we had chained the benches. But I understand the need, you know, the need and the desire for shade, and we can definitely look and see if there are any options out there. Again, it all goes back to, and it just reminded me when I saw the bench, and it reminded me of, I don't know if any of you are big tennis fans, James Blake, who was an American player, or he's retired.
And now owns a pickleball team.
Does he? Well, he actually almost was killed on a tennis court when he ran his head into a pole. And that just goes to show you at the intensity that some people play. Granted, he's a pro, ATP Tour, but he's a pro. But when I see things on the sides of courts and moved around and where they're not supposed to be, those kind of things come to mind. Granted, we don't have players that play at that level of intensity, but we have players that play at higher levels of intensity, and the concern is that we need to make the court safe for them, and they can't have any unexpected things in their path of play. So, but again, I also understand the concern about shade, because I understand that you know, pickleball is more of a wait around social kind of game, and shade may be needed. So we can see if there's any options, but we also have to put safety first all the time. So when I bring in a umbrella with a stand, I have to make sure that there's enough clearance for a player that's running after a ball at the net that goes past the net and doesn't hit the pole, but hits either hits the bench or hits the shade structure that I've put in. So we have to keep that all in mind based on the size of the courts. You know, maybe that's a conversation for the visioning as we move forward. How do we get more shade? You know, I walked up, actually a couple weeks ago, I was walking up on the between the other tennis courts, and I don't know if you noticed, if you're aware, there's just rose beds all along there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, why do we not have any trees here? Because it was so hot that day. So, you know, that's an obvious way for us to bring shade up in that area, and then possibly put some seating along the middle for people that aren't on the courts but are adjacent. 6 and 7 are a little more difficult because it's limited space. So not having the ability to go over there today and look at the court before I came over here and see where we are with, you know, how much space I need on each side, and I'm taking into consideration, pickleball is a little different than tennis, but I'm taking into consideration that a tennis does have certain parameters. Pickleball is a little smaller space, so we have to look at the safety. So while I appreciate and I understand the concerns, we definitely can look and see if there's anything we can do, but there's no guarantees because we have to look at safety first. Yes.
How about like a triangular sort of shade netting in the corners.
So shade, that what ends up happening there, then in turn you're creating dark spots for tennis players. So while that may not impact the game of pickleball, but it will impact the game of tennis. And again, I'm not an expert, and maybe it's a matter of bringing someone out that designs tennis courts or something to look at that and see if there's any way that we could add shade. But the reason why you don't see a lot of things that bring shade is because it changes the court, it changes the game. You know, when one of those lights go out, we get a call because at night it's like, oh, it's shaded in that corner and I can't see the ball. So we have to take all those things in. One great consideration is now an unintended consequence. So we have to keep all those things in mind. That doesn't mean there's not a solution. It just means that when we look at a solution, you know, and another example is we had been requested on this building to look at putting in the windscreens. And we did. We brought in an engineer to see about the ability of putting in the windscreens. Well, the structural engineer came back and he said, well, based on what they've observed, we still need to do X, Y, and Z and get all this other stuff investigated on top of the original investigation to determine if the structure upstairs would hold a windscreen. And if it would probably be a very minimal windscreen, which may not even benefit players. So you know, there's all those unintended consequences. So I know members of the community want a quick, easy answer. There's not always a quick, easy answer. Sorry.
I mean, my only comment would be anchoring the bench in that one current spot. So right above the bench is where you mentioned pickleball is a social sport where people are on the side too. So everyone racks their paddles right above that space. It is a choke point. So it's now not really a bench. It's an obstruction for everyone to have to, that is where everyone goes after every single game. And now there's an obstruction in the way. Not shade related at all. It's just placement wise. I would argue it's probably better not to have anything at all rather than put something right in the middle of where everyone has to go in between every game.
And that's possibly an option too. Once we look at it, you know, do we take it out? You know, there is a benefit sometimes because people do wear different types of shoes when they play tennis. So they come onto the court and they change their shoes or they take a quick break in between. So having some type of seating is nice. Maybe it's something smaller or, you know, that allows for the movement that you're talking about. So, you know, we're going into an age of, I mean, pickleball's been about, we're into what, 2.5 years of a full-blown pickleball program coming on board. So we have to figure out how do we balance the two and still maximize the use of, well, of course, being maximized, but how do we balance the two and not do one thing that interferes with play on one and then another thing that interferes with play on the other. So, and then safety always comes first. But yeah, we can definitely look at different options. We'll work with recreation, but I just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of information this evening. I mean, my background is sports. I have an undergrad degree in phys ed, and I worked in sports for many years for the U.S. Army. So safety and all of that is very important to me, and it's something that's first and foremost. So while we would love to accommodate every request, we have to look at safety first.
Any other items from staff?
Erin, I think, has a few.
I have just one. I sent an email out earlier this week about a community outreach event regarding the Laurel House. And staff that lead that project, it's our property development team and our arts division. They notified me that there's actually a website on this project and there's 2 upcoming meetings. So I just wanted to share that website with everyone that's joining us tonight, as well as the commissioners. So it's weho.org/community/arts-and-culture/Laurel-house. You could also just type in Laurel House on the city's website and find that page, but thought I'd read it. And then there's 2 community meetings. One's virtual, that's the one I sent you all. So that's actually September 27th from 1 to 2 on Zoom. but there's one the day before that's in person. So September 26th from 6 to 7 in the Plummer Park Community Center, rooms 5 and 6, is another opportunity to take part of the conversation about the future of the Laurel House.
Not at Laurel Park.
Yeah.
The location is not at Laurel Park, it's at Plummer Park.
It's not at the Laurel House. That in-person meeting.
Yeah, okay.
It's not, the community in-person event is at Plummer Park Community Center.
Okay.
So that's my item.
Thank you for that, and thank you for sending out those reminders via email too. Those are really helpful.
That's the same night as the Metro session too. Does that conflict?
Different locations.
It's possible. It's difficult to get a night where there's not something else going on, so sometimes there are some double ups, unfortunately. And I think that's a Metro meeting on the 26th, so they're not looking at our city calendar per se.
I'll be at the Zoom.
Wait, Laurel House one is the 27th? It says 27th on the WeHo calendar.
There's two of them.
Oh,
The
there's
first one's the 26th from 6 to 7 at the Plummer
Got it.
Park Community Room. The second one, September 27th, 1
That's
to
right.
2 on Zoom.
That's where I got confused.
I'll see
Got
you.
it.
You'll be at both of them, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. If there aren't any other items from staff, Stephanie, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Hello, Stephanie, Recreation Services Manager. Oh, let me get my chair here. I just wanted to thank you for coming out to the Rec Expo. Those of you that came by, it was great to see all of you to showcase our staff and contract instructors that are involved in our recreation programming. We do have 2 other events coming up that I just wanted to let you know, and I'll send the information to Erin. Our Halloween costume showcase, which is Saturday, October 7th from 11 to 1 here at West Hollywood Park, where you can bring your pets dressed in their best attire, and there will be treats and different activities for them to participate in as well. And then our Youth Halloween Carnival is Saturday, October 21st from 2 to 5 p.m. at Plummer Park. And that's open and free to all of the community members, and different activities and stations for guardians and little ones and older adults to participate in. So we look forward to seeing you at our events. And we will have another meeting before then, but also just a reminder, Veterans Day ceremony will also take place at Salgariello. So we'll send out information on that as well.
Thank you for that. The Saturday, October 7th from 11 to 1 is Halloween?
Halloween, yes, for pets for the Halloween costume showcase.
And then the Youth Carnival is Saturday, October 21st?
Correct, from 2 to 5, and that's at Plummer Park. And both events are free, and all of the information is in our rec reader or on-site on our ActiveNet website.
I was a judge for Halloween once, and it is adorable and vicious. Competition is fierce. It's really fun. I'm glad you guys are still doing that.
It is, yes. We are making a spinoff from our Picasso Pets, which is a very well-attended event where people bring their pets to have a caricature done. It's always booked to full capacity. We actually had to add some on this year. So these are some of the events that we have, and then we're already working on our winter and spring, and of course we'll be back in November to share our data for summer, which was amazing. But thank you again for your support.
Thank you, Stephanie. Aaron?
I looked up the conflict question, and they do conflict. So unfortunately, if you wanted to attend both, you'd have to do the Metro event first, and then the next day, Laurel House.
Great, that concludes our items for staff. We'll move on to item number 12, public comments. I don't see any on Zoom. Do any of the hundreds of people in the audience, any of you have a question, a comment? No? Then we will move on to item number 13, items from commissioners and subcommittee reports. We actually do have a subcommittee report to give you, and I'm going to kick it over to Vice Chair Carlos. This will be a liaison report from the Playhouse Design Steering Committee. The members of the Public Facilities Commission that were on that Design Steering Committee were myself, Vice Chair Carlos, and former Commissioner Elaine Polacek, who is no longer on the commission, sadly, in Beverly Hills. But Richard, do you want to? We have some renderings to show that I think just give a great visual to the public, and we'll be brief.
And you should chime in, Chair. You were there.
I don't talk very much. This was a quick, a very expedient commission, I felt like, or subcommittee. There were, I think, 15 members, and we met 3 different times over the course of 3 months. And I thought we made a lot of progress in a short amount of time. I think maybe if you want to click to the.
Let's go.
I was just going to say, feel free to say next, and I'll be managing the slides for you.
Okay, so this is what it is. The one on the left is the design that kind of we started with, and it changed very little to the final concept. You can see that the wood timber structure there, it was they built it out to the east to kind of enclose the entrance to the garden area, which you'll see in a later slide. And then they cut it back on the west side, as you'll see in the next slide. Let's go to the next one. You can see in the right photograph where they have some kind of impactful signage opportunities in the upper left corner of the playhouse. And then the next slide. And that's it. That's kind of like a nice beauty shot of it. What do you think?
Yeah,
Chair?
by orienting the entrance, this grand staircase, which is a nice architectural detail on it, but by changing the orientation of it, it creates this, you'll see it as we go through a couple more pictures, but what is formerly a parking lot now becomes a nice garden oasis for people to slip into during the day. Kind of our whole point on being on this design steering committee was how do people use this space when they're not attending a play? And I thought this architectural change really kind of activated that space.
Next. So this is kind of a plan view of how the site sits, properties that are left and right. You can start to see the garden, the outdoor garden on the right side of the playhouse. Next. And this is a great shot. Down in the bottom, you can see this is the floating staircase, which gets you upstairs to the second level. And that's a good plan view of the outdoor garden. Next.
So, excuse me, is the entrance on the second level? You have to go up the stairs to the second
So
level?
there's 3 ways. The theater proper is on the second story, is on the second level.
Got it.
All the seating and the stage. And there are 3 ways to get up to the second level. There's an outdoor staircase, then there's an indoor staircase and an indoor elevator. So there's three modes. And so this is the floor plan for the first level. You can see the lobby, the garden, and for me, one of the unique features of the floor plan is the rehearsal space in the middle there, because the way they've designed it is they have doors that open into the garden space, and you can open these doors, and that could become another performance area. So because there's lots of seating in the garden, there's tables, there's planter seating, and there's seating on the stairs. So it'd be a really nice, informal performance area. Do you guys have any questions about this?
Is it only for performances? Can you rent it out for events? Is there multi-purpose?
I think yes. That's more of a programming thing. But
Yeah, Michael's here. I mean, we have to be careful because this is just an overview. It's not necessarily a presentation. We can have them bring this item back on as an agenda item at a later time once they've fully vetted the program.
I'll say there are a lot of events that take place in this room that probably aren't well suited for this room that can take place in this space, and they aren't necessarily a play.
Yeah, and I think that the thought is maybe to have a company run it, like a production company run it, but
I was
again, they're
curious
still
if it
working.
ever would become part of our purview, just as ARC or other locations, right? I didn't know if it would be like the Plumber Park where you can rent that out, or if it's solely outside of that.
I think this is going to be more of a performance place for like a playhouse versus something that would be rented out on a regular basis. There may be city events in there every now and then, but I think it would be a theater production company running it. But then again, you know, that's probably something we could have Rebecca come back and explain the programming side of it, because that's on the programming side of it. We could do that once they vetted it out. So, because it's not on the agenda. On the agenda is just an update this evening about, well, it's not even an agenda item. It's just a commission update.
Okay.
Next.
Next.
Okay, you got it.
So this is the second level, and there's the seating area and the stage to the north. Originally, it was oriented east to west, and because of the great theater professionals we had in the subcommittee, they decided that this was a more successful orientation. Any questions?
Is this the original structure? Within the original structure confines, it's not been expanded into the alley, or it's the same
footprint?
Same footprint.
Do
Thank
you
you.
know how many was seat?
99. How many seats?
Yeah,
99.
99.
It's a non-equity,
Next. This is where all the magic, well, kind of, I don't know, that's probably the wrong phrase, but this is the control room and where all the lighting and the audio and all the technicians are, and the grid.
And there were several theater professionals on the subcommittee that weighed in and gave guidance as to
And
the
tightened it up.
technical requirements required of this space.
Next. So this is a great view. This kind of shows you how you get into the theater, into the lobby. Just to the left of the garden, you can see the garden underneath that floating staircase. You can see those timbers. You can see this great terrace that's outside on the second level for before pre-performance and at intermission to come out and just have a great view of the boulevard. And the other great thing about this design is it's so interactive with the street and people driving by the theater and pedestrians walking by the theater and getting that inside-outside feel, and then looking and seeing, like what's going on in there. You feel like something exciting is going on there, that you might want to go get tickets and you might want to go be involved in that.
And I'll just note that the city playhouse that you see inscribed there, that's just a placeholder. We weren't deciding upon any design or branding, just the architectural design. So it probably won't be that.
I see that the building next door to it, the clothing store, their entrance is right next to where the garden is. Is that going to be changed?
No,
Is there going to be a way for people
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think there's.
Their entrance is actually in that parking lot.
I think their entrance would stay in the same location. We are meeting on that for another thing as well. Just so you know, too, the city owns those buildings to the east. We own everything from the Playhouse all the way to Sweetser.
I thought there was plans to not
There's
have those
plans to
businesses there.
develop them at some point, but in the future, there's plans to develop those locations, but not in the near future. The Playhouse will be done before we started any of the projects.
Next.
Is the name of the venue going to be City Playhouse, or is it
TBD.
TBD?
Next.
And this shows the door that opens up into the rehearsal space that Richard spoke of earlier. An important thing to note, I think, is where you see in this picture the staircase, which is that's looking out now at the street. There is a gate. Well, it's a.
You can see it there. It's that structure lowers down for after hours, so that nobody, so after hours there's nobody in there, so it's closed off. Yeah. After all, right? I don't know what time, but I'll find that out. But you can see the seating. There's seating on the stairs and on the planters and the tables, and then I guess like if there's a performance in the theater, then those doors would be closed, and they would have like refreshments. They could have a bar cart in front of these doors that would be underneath that little bit of cover above the doors. That's and you also get a feel for that great kind of floating staircase. It's pretty.
So it's the last slide. I think next steps, it goes to the council for approval. I believe there's probably an additional ask of money than what was previously set aside. But it's a great design.
Yes, the price has gone up a bit.
I would think so.
Michael and I are just smiling, yeah.
Absolutely.
It is beautiful, though.
So just to clarify, so that the gate will be open during the day so the public can access
You're
it?
right. The garden is open to the public during the day to bring in your lunch or coffee or whatever, just to enjoy it.
And it'll be maintained by the city?
It depends what deal, it depends who the operator of the Playhouse is and what deals we make with them. Usually sometimes we do some of it, they do some of it. It all depends. The programming side of it hasn't. I know today we had a meeting in regards to possible partners to operate the location. I think they're out for RFP at this point in time. Is that correct, right? Yeah. So I know that we sat through the question and answer session for that this afternoon.
Okay, that's it.
That concludes our
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you for everyone that was involved, Michael, Helen, on that committee. We will go ahead to the look ahead calendar and can get a brief update from Aaron on that. And then after that, we will move on to commissioner comments to conclude the evening.
I'm sorry, I did not drag that one over into my memory card, so I can't show it on the screen, but I can just reference item number 14, which is posted in the agenda packet. And there have been no changes since our last meeting. So it's just showing you everything we're projected to bring through the end of this year. So excitingly, we have our annual bus tour in October. So all the members of the public are encouraged to come out and join us on a fun bus tour to look at public facilities. And that's on October 14th, a Saturday. And then November is the meeting dedicated to recreational items. So Stephanie will be our star of that show in November. And then December is still TBD. So, and then some of these items may roll over into the next calendar year. We're hard to believe, but already in Q4 now for 2023. So then we'll, or almost in Q4, I guess. So, not everything may get wrapped up by the end of the year, but those items that haven't will roll over, and then you'll see that in the next look ahead calendar.
And then just real quick on the October meeting, while we will be doing the tour, if there's any business that comes up between now and that time that needs to be attended to, what we've done in the past is we've started the meeting in the EOC, attended to that business, and then went on the tour. So, because now that your purview is expanded, there's a lot of things that are going to have to come before you. And actually, I have an item that needs to come before you before the end of the year about restrooms. So we may have something in October, but we'll try to avoid that if we can, so that you can have your tour. But or I may have to piggyback a little bit off of Stephanie's, but it's kind of park related anyway. It's a council item, but in some of the other divisions and departments that bring items before you, maybe bringing other items before the end of the year as well.
I had a quick question about that, and I think you actually just kind of answered it. The tour for the 14th, 9 a.m., that takes the place of our monthly meeting?
Correct.
So that there's no conflict with the city clerk training, the mandatory code of conduct training on the 11th?
No, I think she probably did it because she knew we weren't doing ours, but yeah.
Okay. Awesome. I just wanted to triple check, and you answered it. Thank you.
Tour's fun. Tour's fun. You get little snack bags. And
I love snacks. I'm there for snacks, yeah.
It is fun.
Great. We will move on to commissioner comments to then conclude the evening. Commissioner Payton, would you like to begin?
Sure. Stephanie loved the ARC event with the open house. That was great. And then excited for all the Halloween activities. And we signed Rose up for basketball. So we're excited to try that out in November. Thanks.
I don't have any comments. Sorry. I'm glad to be here, though. Sorry, I missed the commissioner's dinner.
We're glad you're here and healthy.
Thank you.
Again, thanks everyone for all the hard work. I know you guys put a lot of effort into running these meetings. My only question or comment, I should say, about the documents that were in the consent calendar, which were amazing. I was just curious how we could be of help on the public right-of-way items. I just wasn't sure what, given it's under our purview, like, should we be looking at maintenance? Are we, in what capacity should we be viewing these things? And as a sort of add-on to that, when we think about annual tours going forward, should it be more of a smorgasbord of the items that are currently under our purview and not just facilities? Those are my only two questions / comments.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of what when I was talking about, there'll be other items coming. Also, we're going to bring each one of the divisions or departments in to kind of give us a background of what they're doing. It's kind of been a slow rollout because everybody's extremely busy right now. Now that we've gotten our new budget, everybody's kind of rolling with their projects, but we would be bringing them back and they'll discuss what they do, and that will give you a better idea of, the public right-of-way question is very, is a very good question, because I think that's going to take a little time to define fully. But, for example, David brought the item tonight about the all those changes. Well, while those are in the public, what we consider the public right-of-way legally, they're not necessarily in the purview of this commission. I mean, they want your input, but it's not in the purview of this commission. Whereas something that we do on the sidewalks, like the chair had mentioned about the sidewalks and ficus trees, and how do we find the balance and the diversity, and making sure we don't have the root issues and more native trees that we're not having all these issues with. So, that's your comments very timely.
Commissioner Mason?
No additional comments. Looking forward to Halloween. Wow. Good luck, staff. We're back. Thanks.
And I would encourage any commissioner that wants to come out and see how we clean up. We'll be there about 1 o'clock in the morning, and we welcome you.
I will be part of the problem. I will not be the solution to the problem.
It's a long couple days. It's a long weekend up to Halloween, and then Halloween itself is a long night.
I had the opportunity of attending 2 events this past couple of weeks. The Women Equity Day, the WeHo takeover on the corner. It was quite fun. It was nice meeting other people on other committees and commissions. supporting women always. And then I also went to the Historic Preservation Commission celebration at Plummer Park and got to see some of the facilities that's in our purview and how historic it is, and to bear in mind that when we make decisions, we are making decisions on some historical buildings. And they also have an art installation over there. It's a feminist art show, which I encourage everybody to go check out. It's a really quick walkthrough. If you're ever in the park playing pickleball, you can just walk in there real quick and check out the art. It's really neat. So that's all I have to say.
Vice Chair Carlos.
Thank you, Chair. I also attended. I didn't see you, but
I missed you.
Commissioner Payton. The Historic Preservation Celebration on Saturday, and it was nice to be in Fiesta Hall and hear what some of the council members had to say. And it was interesting to see how Fiesta Hall was really a part of the beginning of our city, and originally where meetings took place, and when we became a city, at Fiesta Hall. So that was great. I have kind of a heads up and a question. I guess on September 21st, the Planning Commission is holding a public hearing regarding recommending to council a zone text amendment to update the city's canopy tree standards. And so that's the heads up. Now my question is, did we hear that on the PVC?
It's private trees.
Oh.
It's private property trees, it's not public trees.
Oh, that's good to know then. Okay.
Yeah, Michael, it's coming out of UDOS. It's a private property tree initiative.
Okay, I thought it was like part of urban, but maybe it is anyway.
No, it's not part of our urban forest well, I mean, there are components in our urban forest management plan to talk about private trees, but this is a private property initiative. I don't know if Michael wants to he can give you a quick response there.
Yeah, it started with private and public, and now this has just moved to private for now because the public portion was a bit complex. So this focuses on private. It's been continued also because there's some ongoing coordination with other areas and legal review, but till October.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Helen.
I will give some final thoughts. Thank you to everyone for this evening. Some meetings that I've attended in the past month. I went to the Rec Expo. Stephanie, I thought you guys did a fantastic job. I saw different divisions within Rec that I didn't know existed. We talked about it there, but different excursions that you all put on, different activities. I'm certainly looking at all of that now that I have a little one in the house, and how can I get her out of the house? Maybe she's a little too young, but it was a good preview of getting ready and prepared for a November meeting where we can kind of see a fuller view of the entire department. Great event. Thank you for that. I attended and I know others did too, the Plummer Park Council ad hoc subcommittee meeting earlier last month, and it was a fantastic meeting. Mostly, I felt like it was 2 council members, and I felt like most of the agenda was updating them on everything that we've done over the past year and a half. And that was, I was proud to see that, just of the work that we've put in. And that is a good segue into next Monday night city council meeting. The agenda just came out for it, and we and staff are the highlight of the evening, in that at that Plummer Park subcommittee meeting, staff presented a community garden plan and came up with even more suggestions than we came up with in the room in the Plummer Park in the City Hall community room 2 months ago. And in such a short time, they came up with another 2 locations at the Fuller Street entrance to Plummer Park, and a 3rd location in the Plummer Park North parking lot to add even more additional beds to a proposed community garden program. So on Monday night, the City Council will hear a plan that includes a total of 45 beds, which is more than they have now. I realize there's a waiting list, and I think the price tag is only $200,000 for it, but I say only, I mean, so big applause for staff to act so quickly in such a short amount of time and come up with creative ideas to really address a need and address a community. And I'm proud of us that we were able to have them come before this commission and be a part of the solution, and proud of staff for coming up with a plan. And tune in on Monday night, come to the meeting, or at least watch it at home, but it'll be very important to those that are a part of the community garden here in WeHo. And that's it for me. If there's not.
Chair, could I just do a quick summary on what's in that staff report?
Yes, please.
So just real quickly, when we presented to the ad hoc committee, we presented, of course, the north lot, and then there were 2 locations at Fuller. One of the locations at Fuller was, if you're familiar with that side area over on the Fuller side, there's a larger side on the north side of the sidewalk, and then there's a smaller side. There's a smaller location on the south side. So we proposed all of the south side, and in the initial proposal to the ad hoc, it showed using the entire north side. Well, I went out there with our staff, and we're not recommending that we use the entire north side because a large part of the north side is full shade all day. I know some of the gardeners came to the meetings and mentioned that they could grow in shade, but I think that means partial shade. That doesn't mean full shade. There's not much you can grow in when you have no sun at all. So we're proposing, we'll get a few less beds. We're proposing to move that over and then just use a portion of that section. So it is a slight revision from what was presented at the meeting. And then we also made it very clear that we would be using somewhat smaller beds, because currently we're using the elevated beds. We're using the raised beds, we're not using elevated. And the raised beds are basically, it's a form and we throw dirt in it, and the dirt rests on the ground. An elevated bed is where it's a container and dirt goes in it. So you just can't have that large scale that they have at the over at the park at their current location. So it'll be a little bit smaller. But as you've heard in the meetings, most of the people said they had more than enough vegetables and things that they could give away. So we thought if we made it a little bit smaller, we could incorporate more gardeners. So that's kind of the summary of what's in the staff report. And the only modification, again, is the size of the location, which would leave the other side, of course, available for community members to use for passive recreation. So, and we are proposing it at mid-year, because that's the direction we've been given, is to any new budget projects be proposed for mid-year funding. So we're not coming in and asking for the money right away, because we, of course, have several other projects in the queue, and we would not be able to get it to it until mid-year. Yes.
So when would that mean that people could be in the gardens?
It would be spring.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be spring. Spring, early summer would be when they would get in, depending on when they take the mid-year. Usually we take the mid-year January, February, sometimes March, but yeah, we have and it would take a little bit of time to get everything ready, because it's not just a matter of bringing in the beds and putting them on the grass. We have to come in and we have to dig out about 4 to 6 inches of the grass and put in DG, and then run potable water to that location. Up north, we're going to have some problems with potable water, so those are all the different kind of hurdles we'd have. But in the fencing, the lead time of the fencing. So.
Thanks for that. That's great.
Okay, if there aren't any other comments, then I will go ahead and conclude tonight's meeting at 8:46 p.m. We will conclude recess until our next meeting, October 14th at Saturday, October 14th at what time? 9 a.m.?
Correct.
9 a.m.
9 a.m. City Hall.
Great. And do I have to gavel, or what do I? And we're done.
Adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay. And we have snacks in the back.